one held by the Faculty of Social and Political Sciences.
For me,
Welcome to the second Sunan Ampel International Conference on Political Social Science 2000.
Kind of the conference is kind of
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the second day of the third Sunan Ampel International Conference of Political and Social Sciences, SAICOPSS 2023,
with the theme Social and Political Transformations in the Digital Era, Prospect for Humanity. Thank you. Before we proceed with our program, we would like to thank everybody who supported this conference to be held. Several honorable mentions, especially to the Dean of the Faculty of Social and Political Sciences, UINSA Ampel, Surabaya, Professor Dr. Abd Chalik M.Ag,
the Vice Dean of Academic and Institutional Affairs, Dr. Eva Yulianti Umdatul Izzah, SOS MSE,
the Vice Dean of General Administration, Planning and Financial Affairs, Dr. Ani Nurhayati, MSE,
the Vice Dean of Cooperation and Student Affairs, Dr. Muhammad Syaiful Bahar, SAG, MSE, the Head of the Department and Secretary of Political Sciences, Sociology and International Relations.
And last but not least, to all lecturers, managerial staff, and all participants. Ladies and gentlemen, we would like to welcome our invited speakers. Dr. Jan Jaap de Ruiter from Tilburg University, the Netherlands.
Linan Jia, Ph.D. from Beijing Foreign Studies University, China.
Azmil Mohd Tayeb, Ph.D. from University Science Malaysia.
Professor Dr. Abd Chalik M.Ag from UIN Sunan Ampel, Surabaya, Indonesia.
Dear Excellency, distinguished guests, and all participants, let's begin our session today by reciting Basmalah.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is a great honor. My name is Nadia Devina, and this is my partner,
I, Muhammad Raditya,
as the Master of Ceremony in this event.
Dear Excellencies, distinguished guests, and all participants, for a while, let us see the short clips from the previous SAICOPSS.
Make sure that you're keeping up with us by following our Instagram at FISIP UINSA and SAICOPSS with double S. Dear Excellency, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we arrive at the main event, that is the third plenary session with our invited speaker of day 2, Azmil Mohd Tayeb, Ph.D. from University Science, Malaysia, with the theme, The Rise of Malay-Muslim Majoritarianism in Post-2022 General Election in Malaysia.
With Professor Dr. Abd Chalik M.Ag from UIN Sunan Ampel, Surabaya, Indonesia, with the theme Democracy Without Parties, Kyai in Indonesia Local Elections. And in this plenary session will be moderated by Filosofia Marsha Ma'rifat S. Lupin M.A. To Mrs. Filosofia, the time is yours.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wasallam. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the Master of Ceremony, and welcome to the second day of the third Sunan Ampel International Conference of Political and Social Sciences, SAICOPSS 2023. My name is Fia, and I will be the moderator of today's plenary session. On this plenary session, there will be two invited speakers presenting. The first one is Mr. Azmil Mohd Tayeb, Ph.D. from the University of Science Malaysia. And the second one is Professor Dr. Haji Abd Chalik M.Ag, as the Professor in Political Islam and also as the Dean of Faculty of Social and Political Sciences, UINSA Sunan Ampel, Surabaya, Indonesia. And for each speaker will be given approximately 45 minutes to deliver his presentation. And after each speaker has completed their presentation, we will proceed to the question and answer section. And on the question and answer section, please raise your hand for everyone who is in the auditorium, and also use the Zoom meeting raise hand feature for the online participants to ask a direct question. And our host will turn on your microphone. Or you can also ask a question by typing your question on our chat box. Please state your name and institution of origin before asking your question. And let us know to which speaker are you asking the question. Either is to Mr. Azmil or to Professor Abd Chalik, or to both of our speakers. Okay, let us start this plenary session by welcoming our first speaker, Mr. Azmil Mohd Tayeb, Ph.D. from the University of Science Malaysia, and he will be presenting about the rise of Malay-Muslim majoritarianism in post-2022 general election in Malaysia. To Mr. Azmil Mohd Tayeb, Ph.D., the time and screen is yours.
Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Thank you to the moderator and also to the two MCs. And also thank you to UINSA Sunan Ampel for inviting me to present on this occasion, in this conference today. So I'm glad to be back, even though it's virtually. So I'm I see that it's really gearing up well so far. So as you can see, the topic of my presentation today is solely focusing on Malaysia, right? So, but I try to make this as relevant as possible to Indonesia. I think there are parallels that can be drawn between what we are seeing in Malaysia, as I will show in this presentation, with what's going on in Indonesia. So especially when you look at the Aksi 212, right, in 2016 in Indonesia, right? So we have a huge demonstration in Jakarta protesting against Ahok, the governor of Jakarta, right, against his use of some Quranic verses, right, which was deemed to be a blasphemy. And then later on, Ahok was found guilty on blasphemy charges, and then he was jailed for 2 years, right? So at the heart of, when you look at the Aksi 212, right? So at the heart of it is this very strong, very pervasive insecurity, the feeling of insecurity amongst the Muslims in Indonesia, right? So there is this feeling that Islam is under threat, right? So when you look at a lot of the slogans, right, during Aksi 212, you look at the placards, spanduk, right? You can see mempertahankan Islam, right? Mempertahankan kedaulatan Islam and things like that. So, and we are seeing similar dynamics in Malaysia as well. So this dynamic has been obvious since 2018. So even though the focus of this presentation is after the 2022 elections in Malaysia, but this Malay-Muslim majoritarian sentiment has been around at least since 2018. Right. So as we know in Malaysia, 2018 was a pivotal moment in Malaysian history. Right. It's a very important moment in Malaysian history because for the first time, Malaysia has a new government. So before that, for 60 years, Malaysia has a single coalition. Malaysia was governed by a single coalition. Right, so there had never been a change of government for more than 60 years. And in 2018, for the first time, Malaysia had a new government. Right, so imagine what happened in 2018 in Malaysia is what happened in Indonesia in 1998. Right, so maybe some of you are not old enough to remember what happened in 1998, but I'm sure that you read that in your history books. Reformasi in Indonesia in 1998, right? And then on 21st of May, 1998, the former President Suharto stepped down, right? And then we had, and it began the Reformasi era for Indonesia. Right, so it's that equivalent to what happened in 2018 in Malaysia. Of course, you know, when a huge, almost revolutionary change happened, it created a lot of uncertainty, right? So people don't know what to expect after a change comes to the country. So in 2018, so a new government came to power, right? So if you look at this table here, right? So I will give you an introduction of political parties in Malaysia because I assume that many of you perhaps don't know that much about Malaysian politics. So I will give you an overview of the many of the political parties that we can find in Malaysia now, right? So in 2018, the coalition Pakatan Harapan, PH, right? So the one in red here came to power, replacing Barisan Nasional, the one in blue, the one at the top here. The Barisan Nasional has ruled Malaysia for more than 60 years, right? And finally replaced by Pakatan Harapan in 2018, right? So you can see there is a big difference between these two coalitions, right? So Barisan Nasional, even though it is multi-ethnic, multiracial, but it's represented by race-based or ethnic-based political parties, right? So you can see here, Malays have their own political party, which is UMNO. The Chinese have their own political party, which is MCA. The Indians have their own political party, which is FISIP, right? And then also other Borneo tribes, you know, the Dayak tribes, and also other different tribal groups in Sabah and Sarawak, right, in Malaysian Borneo. So it is diverse, but at the same time, it's also very exclusive, right? So this is, I'm sure for Indonesians, this is unimaginable, right? Because in Indonesia, if you want to establish a political party, it cannot be ethnic-based, right? So political party needs to have presence in all provinces, right? In more than half of kabupaten, in more than half of kecamatan, throughout the country, right? So it needs to have a national presence and a national identity. I think that's the requirement, the major requirement to establish a political party in Indonesia. But that's not the case. Can we go back to the previous slide, please? No, the one in the table, yes. So it's different in Malaysia, right? So in Malaysia, politics is highly racialized, highly ethnicized, right? So it's the politics is divided along ethnic and religious lines. So when Pakatan Harapan, PH, right, came to power in 2018, it created a lot of uncertainty, especially amongst the Malays, right? So because for the longest time, the Malays were dominant. They had special position in Malaysia. Hak istimewa, right? So special privilege as Malay, as Muslim, right, as provided by the Constitution. Okay. Okay, here. Okay, so to just to show you the kind of political transformation, which I think is the theme of the conference, right? Political and social transformation. Here, political transformation in Malaysia in a nutshell, right? So since independence, Malaysia's independence in 1957, right? Since the first general election in 1955, until now. So Malaysia has gone through 15 general elections since independence, right? So we can see a transformation from being a one-party that governs the country, right? So for more than 60 years, only one party or one coalition, which is the Barisan Nasional, right? So the one that I showed you earlier, the one that is multi-ethnic, but at the same time represented by various ethnic-based political parties, right? And then in 2018, Malaysian political system became more competitive. So suddenly the opposition became stronger, became more competitive, managed to win more seats, managed to win more state governments in Malaysia. And then now in 2022, Malaysia has a multi-party system, so which means that more than two parties, so three parties actually, three coalitions. So to avoid confusion, political parties in Malaysia compete as a coalition. So meaning that the coalitions are formed before the election. So I know it's quite a strange concept to understand, maybe in Indonesian context, because in Indonesia, the coalition tend to be formed after the election, right? So in Malaysia, the coalitions are formed before the election and they compete as one party, right? So I tend to use the term coalition and also party interchangeably. So here we see the transformation from this consociational type of political arrangement. So for those of you who are not familiar with the concept of consociationalism, which is a concept in political science, basically it's a system that's practiced in a highly divided, highly fragmented country such as Malaysia, Belgium, Lebanon, Canada, where you have different ethnic groups, different regional groups, and these groups, these minority groups especially, they have representation at the highest level of government, right? So usually they're represented by their own political parties. So in Malaysia's case, it's the Chinese, the Indians, the Malays. They form their own political parties, and these political parties represent their community's interests at the highest level of government, right? So the Chinese community's interests will be represented by their political party, which is MCA. And then the Indian community's interests will be represented by Indian political party, MIC, and the Malays represented by UMNO. But of course, this arrangement is not equal in partnership, right? So there is the first amongst equal, which is UMNO, right? Primus inter pares. So there is this understanding that the Malays are always going to be the big brother, right? So the Malays are going to be special, pribumi, right? So or bumi putra in the case of Malaysia, right? So they always have special privileges, and they're always going to be dominant, right? So in this case, UMNO is always going to be dominant in this coalition, Barisan Nasional Coalition. And fast forward to 2022, we're seeing this very open, very explicit expression of the Malay majoritarianism in Malaysia. So what exactly is Malay majoritarianism, right? So this is the sentiment that originated from the insecurities, the fears that I've mentioned earlier in this presentation. So especially since 2018, when UMNO lost, right? So Barisan Nasional lost for the first time in 60 years. So many Malays felt insecure about their future, right? About the future of Malay rights and Islamic rights in Malaysia. They felt that it is under threat, it is being attacked. So a lot of fear mongering, right? In the past few years. And this gives rise to the sentiment that the Malay rights and Islamic rights in Malaysia need to be protected. It needs to be defended. But who is going to defend Malay rights and Islamic rights in Malaysia? UMNO is no longer powerful. UMNO just lost. Barisan Nasional just lost the election. Because for the longest time, the defender and protector of Malay and Islamic rights in Malaysia had been UMNO, had been Barisan Nasional, right? But in 2018, Barisan Nasional lost. And UMNO is no longer a reliable defender of Malay and Islamic rights in Malaysia, at least in the eyes of many Malays in Malaysia, right? So who is going to be, so which political party, which group now set to replace UMNO as defender of Malay and Islamic rights in Malaysia? So that is the focus of my presentation today, right? So because this is what we're seeing, right? So in Malaysia now, and it's so highly polarized, right? So the Malays completely rejected UMNO, right? UMNO is no longer seen as a reliable and dependable protector of Malay and Islamic rights in Malaysia. UMNO is no longer seen as credible by Malay voters. And also the huge influence of young Malays who are just recently given the rights to vote. For the longest time in Malaysia, before 2022, the voting age, the minimum voting age in Malaysia is 21 years old, right? So I know this is also strange for Indonesian because you can vote 17 years old, right? So if I'm not mistaken, in Indonesia, you can already vote. But in Malaysia, for the longest time, the minimum voting age is 21, right? So before, in 2022, the parliament amended the constitution to lower the voting age from 21 to 18. So now 18 to 20 years old can vote in Malaysia. And they did vote in the last election. So many young Malays decided to reject UMNO, right? So these newly enfranchised young Malays who are also deeply conservative, right? Deeply religious and deeply conservative, who voted their values, right? I will show later on, some of the survey findings done to look at the values that you typically find amongst young Malays. So, and this insecurity and fear among the Malays resulted in a deeply polarized society, right? So in Malaysia right now, when you see a Chinese person, for example, right? So most likely this Chinese person, without even knowing anything about this person, you know that this person voted for the opposition, for PH, for Pakatan Harapan, right? Because 95% of Chinese in Malaysia voted for Pakatan Harapan, for PH, right? So if you meet a random Chinese person on the street, you don't know anything about this person, you can make a really good guess that this person voted, what party this person voted for, right? The same for Indians as well, even though a bit less, right? So about 85% of Indians voted for PH, right? So slightly less than Chinese. But then the opposite, I guess not the opposite, but I guess the same for Malays as well, right? When you see a Malay person, and you know that this Malay person most likely did not vote for PH, right? So almost 90% of Malays did not vote for PH in the last election. So it's very polarized, very divided in Malaysia right now, right? Along ethnic and religious lines. So what's happening here is a hardening of ethno-religious identities, right? So not just amongst the Malay-Muslims, we can see becoming more extreme in your views, but also amongst the non-Malays and non-Muslims, right? So if you remember the Newton law of motion, right? So for every action, there's an opposite and equal reaction. So that's exactly what's happening. So if you see the Malay Muslim becoming more conservative, more extreme in their views, more ideological, you can see similar reaction from the other side as well, right? So it takes two to tango, so to speak. So just an overview of so the focus, I guess the focus for this presentation is to look at PAS. So if you remember PAS from the early slides, PAS is one of the Islamic party that's contending in Malaysian politics, right? I mean, PAS has been around since early 50s. It's a permanent fixture in Malaysian political landscape. But PAS has mainly been a regional or provincial party, right? So if you look at this map here, the one in green is PAS territory, right? So PAS strongholds. So basically in the north and northeast of Peninsular Malaysia, right? So it hasn't been able to expand beyond its traditional strongholds, right? So maybe I should backtrack a little bit. So when I say earlier that UMNO has not been seen as the reliable defender of Malay and Islamic rights in Malaysia, PAS has been benefiting from that, right? So anytime there is a crisis with UMNO, the Malay party, PAS has been the beneficiary of that. So now PAS has been seen as the new and more reliable, more dependable defender of Malay and Islamic rights in Malaysia. So this is in 2018, right? So PAS won 18 seats in the parliament, right? So out of 222, I mean, which is a respectable number of seats, right? Considering that PAS competed on its own, right? So it's not part of any coalition. And then fast forward to 2022, just in a span of 4 years. So PAS suddenly more than triple, right? Its seat. Excuse me. So 43 seats, right? So from a huge jump from 18 seats, right? And PAS managed to gain all these seats at the expense of UMNO, right? So the Malay voters rejected UMNO because UMNO is no longer seen as a reliable defender of Malay and Islamic rights, and PAS now replacing UMNO in that position, right, in the eyes of the Malay voters. So it's a big jump, right? So a big improvement just in a matter of 4 years. And then in a few months ago, we had state elections. So state elections is like pilkada in Indonesia, right? Pemilihan kepala daerah. In this case, in Malaysia is the election to choose the state government. So state is a negara bahagian, right? So in Malaysia has 14 negara bahagian, 14 states. So some states, they have election at the same time with the general election. I think like Indonesia as well since the last election, right? So the pilkada, so some pilkada and also the pemilihan presiden all done at the same time. But there are also some states that had their elections separately, right, from the general election. So in August this year, so 6 states had their elections. And then you can see here, Perikatan Nasional, the coalition that PAS is part of, so won more than 90%, right, of the seats of the Malay majority seats. So basically, the Malays have made their choice, right? Have decided that PAS now is the rightful defender of Malay and Islamic rights in Malaysia, to replace UMNO, right? So we reject UMNO, and now we replace UMNO with PAS. So, and the Malay voters have spoken, right? So you can see from the results here, right? So not just in the north and northeast, we can see that PAS, actually have been able to make inroads, incursions into urban and semi-urban areas in the state of Selangor. So if you've been to Malaysia, Selangor is the state that surrounds Kuala Lumpur, right? So it's a wealthy state, highly industrialized, and then the Malays there also voted for PAS and PN, right? So no longer voted for UMNO or for PH. So just I won't bore you with the numbers, but just to show you the kind of transformation that have been taking place, right, since the 2 elections. So this is the parliamentary seat of Arau, which is the state in the state of Perlis, the northern state in Malaysia that borders Thailand. So Arau has always been an UMNO stronghold, right? So you can see here in the last election, 2022, the UMNO candidate received less than half of what the UMNO candidate received in 2018, right? So that's a huge loss, right? Not even get the same number of votes, but even getting much fewer votes, right? So more than half, even though there is an increase of more than 12,000 eligible voters. So these are the new voters, right? The young people who now have the right to vote. So you can see here, this is a complete rejection of UMNO by the Malay voters in Arau. So Arau here is, I would say, 98 or 99% Malays, right? So basically it's homogeneously Malay here, right? So it's not an ethnically diverse parliamentary seat. And here also you can see Kepala Batas, which is in my state, Penang. This is a majority Malay, and UMNO has been dominant here since independence. This is also the seat of the former Prime Minister Abdullah Badawi. You can see that UMNO actually managed to maintain its voters, but then it lost the young Malays, right? So the young Malays voted for PAS here, right? So which ended up with PAS winning the in Kepala Batas, right? So here you can see also rejection of UMNO by young Malay voters. Here is an interesting case, right? So Alostar, which is in the state of Kedah, in the northern part of Malaysia, near the Thai border. So Alostar has always elected Chinese representative, right? So because Alostar has a huge Chinese minority in its parliamentary district, so almost 40% of the voters in Alostar are actually Chinese, right? So their representative over the years had always been Chinese, right? Represented by Chinese politicians, member of parliament. But for the first time, now PAS won in Alostar, right? Defeating the Chinese candidates. And for the first time, Alostar elected a conservative Malay politician to represent the district in the parliament. So this is one of the biggest surprise on election night, because nobody thought that PAS can win here, but when it did so, even in places where the minority, in this case Chinese, form a substantive percentage of the voters, 40% in this case, but still PAS managed to win, right? So here you can see a bit more statistics. I'm sorry, if I bore you with my with my numbers, but you can see here as well, right? So in the 7 out of 10 seats where young and new Malay voters can play a crucial role, and PN PAS actually won in 5 of them, right? So 5 out of 7, right? So that's how influential the young Malay voters are. And here also in the state election, the recent state election, you can see here the one that in the red rectangle, red square here. You can see these are all Malay majority areas, which has more than 30% youth voters, right? And you can see them overwhelmingly voted for PN or for PAS, right? And totally rejected UMNO. Okay. So why do the Malay voters, the young Malay voters, vote in a certain way, right? I mean, of course, the first reason is the PN and PAS managed to win. Is definitely more effective on social media, especially TikTok, right? So people call the last year's, the 2022 election, the TikTok election in Malaysia, because that's where the election was won and lost, right? And PN PAS had been very effective in utilizing TikTok to reach out to young Malay voters, and very effective, right? Especially in getting across its message. And its message is that out of the 3 parties or the 3 coalitions that compete, right? So there's a Pakatan Harapan PH, Barisan Nasional BN, and Perikatan Nasional PN, right? So PN, Perikatan Nasional, is the cleanest out of the 3, right? The least corrupt, right? So that was the campaign message that was being used again and again, and it was effective, right? So the current president of UMNO, Zaid Hamidi, right, the head of the Barisan Nasional coalition, and he was under 47 charges of corruption, right? 47, right? 47, yeah. And that was used as a campaign issue in the last election, right, in 2022 election. So I've attended a lot of campaign rallies, a lot of charamas in the 2 weeks of campaign period last year, right? And the message was consistent, right? So this is the message from Perikatan Nasional candidates. They say, if you vote for BN, right, Barisan Nasional, you vote for someone like Zaid Hamidi, who is currently facing 47 charges of corruption and money laundering, to become the Prime Minister of Malaysia. Do you want that? Of course, I mean, no one wants a corrupt person to become the Prime Minister or the head of any country, right? And then say, oh, if you vote for Pakatan Harapan, PH, which is also not the cleanest, even though they claim to be clean, but they are not clean. Look at the Lim Guan Eng, you know, the one of the leaders in PH. You know, he also has corruption. He's also under corruption investigation. Several actually corruption investigations. And also look at Anwar Ibrahim. Yeah, he's morally unclean, right? Because he was charged twice for sodomy, right? So he was imprisoned twice on sodomy charges, right? So whether that's true or not is a whole different matter, right? But that's proof enough that he is not as clean, even he's morally compromised. So do you want this person to be the head of your country? So this kind of messaging was very effective, right? Especially for young Malays, right? So this is the kind of message that you see on TikTok, especially, right? Being repeated over and over again. And it resonates well in the young Malay voters, and it resonates with their values, right? So I think there are a lot of this misunderstanding that young voters tend to be more progressive, tend to lean towards the left ideology, right? Tend to be more maybe socialist oriented, tend to favor a social welfare state. But that is not necessarily the case in Malaysia, right? So the young Malays, as you can see from these survey findings, they're not particularly progressive. In fact, they're opposite of what progressive is, right? So they're very deeply conservative, right? So this is the survey done in 2022 by Merdeka Center, which is a major survey organization in Malaysia, like Indikator Indonesia or LSE in Indonesia, and Sisters in Islam, so which is a progressive Islamic NGO that survey Muslim youth from 15 years old to 30 years old, right? And to see what their views are on various issues, right? So here I'm just give you a sample of the survey findings. And also as a disclosure, I was involved in this youth survey as well. So I was involved in the discussing the findings of this youth survey when it was released last year. So you can see here some of the examples, right? So when it comes to religious freedom, right? So this is young Malays, right? For 15-year-old to 30 years old. So they say 44% believe that all people of Malaysia should be allowed to choose their religion, right? Yeah, but then at the same time, 7% say that Muslims should be allowed to change their religion. So there is a discrepancy here, right? So there's a freedom of religion, but only freedom of religion for non-Muslims to become Muslims, but not the other way around, right? And then you see on gender equality and things like that. you can see actually not too bad, right? So yeah, but many people favor gender segregation between men and women in public areas and things like that. Here you can see some of these questions also, right? Again, you know, there's this sort of this contradiction that you find, right? So on one hand, they say 63% agree that a person should be able to freely choose how he or she wants to live his or her life, right? To dress, and sexuality are my private matters. So, but at the same time, you can see there's a rejection of lifestyles that are not considered Islamic, right, or different from their lifestyle. So there's like like double standard, right? You can see, and this is a theme that is consistent throughout the findings. And here is a more telling views, right, of these young Malays, right, because it involves Islam in public life and also in politics, in laws. So you can see here, it can be quite disturbing, right? So those who agree that the Quran should replace the Constitution, for example, right? Even though Malaysia is a highly diverse country, Malay-Muslims only constitute about 65%, right? Not like in Indonesia, where Muslims are 88, 89% of the country. But here you can see, you know, should replace the constitution. Muslims should only vote for Muslim leaders, only Muslims allowed to become prime minister. Here, revival of the caliphate, right? So, and things like that. So this is, you know, what many of the young Malays actually believed in, right? And implementation of hudud laws, which actually has been a constant debate, discussion in Malaysia, right? So Malaysia should implement hudud laws, should strengthen the Sharia courts in Malaysia and things like that, you know. So Sharia court should be more supreme than the civil court. So these are all, you can see the views here, right? So, and this survey that I show you in 2022 actually has been done before. So the first time it was carried out in 2011 by Goethe Institute and Friedrich Naumann Stiftung and Medica Center. And then it was replicated in 2022, right? So the same as well. So no changes in 2011 and 2022, right? So, and then you can see here, in 2015, there's a survey done by the Global Attitude Survey by Pew Research Center, right? The American survey organization. So you can see a comparison, right, with Indonesia. So 64%, yeah, you can see, even though Indonesia has a lot more Muslims, right? But you can see a much higher percentage of Indonesians rejected ISIS as opposed to Malaysia, right? And then those who have favorable view of ISIS, right? In Malaysia, 11%. That's a huge number of Muslims that think positively of ISIS, right? Compared to Indonesia, which is only 4%, even though Indonesia has a lot more Muslim. And then in 2018, right, so also show this disturbing finding, right? So 28% of Malaysian Muslims show violence receptive tendencies when justifying violence in the name of Islam, right? So violence receptive means that these people, they support jihad, they support the physical form of struggle, in a cause to defend Islam, right? But they don't necessarily carry out this act of jihad themselves, right? But they support it, they spiritually support the act, but they themselves don't go to Afghanistan or Syria or other places to carry out jihad and join ISIS there, right? So 28%, and then 18.1% Malaysian Muslims exhibited support for JI, right? So that's a huge number of Malay Muslims, right? Here, so, and it's quite disturbing. And this is more recent article, the more recent news. You can see here, so based from this survey, nearly 9 in 10 Muslims back making Sharia code Malaysia's official law. So to replace the civil law in Malaysia, right? So right now, the civil law still theoretically more supreme, higher than, more, I guess, powerful than Sharia law, right? But slowly the Sharia law is getting more and more equal to civil law, right? Yeah, and then so you can see here many Muslims actually support that Sharia law become the official law of Malaysia. So finally, the last part of my presentation. So from all these things that we see right now, right? So what's happening is this deeply polarized society in Malaysia, right? So it's sharply divided between ethnic lines and religious lines, right? So people, when like I've mentioned before, if you see a Chinese person, most likely which party this Chinese person voted for, or Indian person or Malay person, or a Muslim person or a Christian person. So you get the idea, right? So this is what's happening in Malaysia, right? So highly polarized, highly divided, highly fragmented. So you can see here, just to show you how highly polarized it is. You can see the Chinese here, you can see 91, 95, voted for PH, right? So the same like Indians as well, 81%, 81%. So 8 out of 10 Indians, more than 9 out of 10 Chinese voted for PH, right? And the Malays are the opposite, of course, right? So that's what we are seeing in Malaysia now. So then, what about the usual divides? How do wealthy, affluent voters vote compared to less wealthy, less economically privileged voters vote, or Malay voters in this case, right? Or urban versus rural, right? Is there any difference between how or where the voters are, right? So are there any different voting patterns? But in this case, no, right? So you can see the support for PASS actually cuts across socioeconomic divide. So you can see there are people, Malays, middle class, upper middle class, who voted for PASS, right? For various reasons, mainly because they used to be supportive of UMNO, but now they don't see UMNO as no longer the reliable defender of Malay and Islamic rights. So they shifted. So this Malay upper middle class voters shifted their votes to PASS, to PN, to Perikatan Nasional, right? So PASS is no longer seen as as a provincial party or as a rural party, right? So partai kampung or partai, so that's because that's where PAS tends to have its base, right, in rural areas, in the kampungs. But that's no longer the case, right? So PAS has been able to make inroads in urban and semi-urban areas, getting support from middle class, upper middle class Malays, right? So more economically affluent Malays. And then, of course, the old urban and rural divide is no longer applicable, right? So urban does not mean progressive, right? So there are many Malays who live in urban areas, live in big cities, are also deeply conservative, and they vote their values, right? So they vote these Malays who no longer trusted UMNO, and then they shifted their votes to PAS and Perikatan Nasional. So it's no longer just the rural voters that supported PAS, but also urban voters, right? So these divides are no longer relevant in Malaysian politics, at least for now. So before I end my presentation, just do a bit of shameless self-promotion, I guess. So these are some of my work, some of the books, my recent books, I guess, that came out in the past few years. So if you're interested, do let me know. And then I can maybe share the PDF with you, right? So if you're interested in this topic, especially my book that compares Islamic education in Indonesia and Malaysia. Yeah. Finally, this is my contact. So if you're interested to discuss more about what's going on, if you feel that there are a lot of parallels between what's happening in Indonesia and Malaysia, or maybe you want to contact me you want to get copies of the PDF of my book or articles, feel free to contact me here, my email and my WhatsApp number here. So with that, I'd like to end my presentation today. Thank you again for inviting me on this conference, and I hope that I look forward to fruitful Q&A sessions afterward. So thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Azmil Mohd Tayeb, Ph.D., for your interesting presentation. And from Mr. Azmil's presentation, we learned that Malaysia has been through a lot of political transformation, and its political coalition is actually based on identity or ethnic base. And we note that Malaysia has been through about 15 general elections since its independence, and it has transformation from one party, two party, and until multi-party. And before 2018, Barisan Nasional has ruled for 16 years, if I'm not mistaken. But then Pakatan Harapan, or PH, came to power in 2018. And in 2020, Perikatan Nasional then came to power. But then in 2022, there come to very explicit of Malay-Majoritarianism, because of the sentiment that originated from the insecurity of the loss of Barisan Nasional in 2018, and they fear that there is no one who will defend or protect the Islamic rights in Malaysia. And also from the Merdeka Center survey found that 97% youth Muslim agreed that Malaysia to be an Islamic state, and even 82% agree that Quran should replace the constitution, and they also agreed that only Muslims can perform as prime minister. Okay. Next, let us welcome to the second speaker of this plenary session, Professor Dr. Haji Abd Chalik, Master of Religious Studies from UINSA Ampel, Surabaya, Indonesia. And he will be presenting about a democracy without parties, Kyai in Indonesian local election. to Professor Dr. Haji Abdul Chalik, Master of Religion Studies. Time is yours.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Pak Azmil Tayeb, hear my voice?
Yes, I can hear you, Pak Prof. Yes, go ahead.
Oke, terima kasih. Thank you. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, la haula wala quwata illa billah, amma ba'du. For all audience, for all students, lecturers, and staff, especially for the speakers, Associate Professor Azmil Mohd Tayeb from the University Science Malaysia. Thank you very much for your participation and your presentation. I think it is interesting because especially for me, Pak Tayeb, that I have the same research like you, especially in Indonesia, because my passion and my concentration, especially in local election in Islamic parties, and I have some research and the latest article and research in 2 years, maybe especially speaking about concentration about the political parties and the local Indonesian local election in Indonesia, like maybe continue. Okay. This is the latest article. Yeah, the half-hearted compromise within Indonesian politics, the dynamic of political coalition among Islamic parties, and then the new trajectory of Kyai political participation in contemporary Indonesia, rise, challenges, and opportunities. And the last, woman in defense of religious non-political attitude of the 3 Kyais in East Java's local contestation, an article in review in ASEAN Journal of Women Studies. Maybe in the next year, in 2024, maybe it will be published in the AGWS. I would like to present about the democracy without parties, Kyai in Indonesia, in the local elections. I would like to explain about how the Kyai's position and how the Kyai in make some determining some decision in the political action, especially in the local elections. And I have some experience when I conducted research in some areas, in some districts in East Java, like in Situbondo, Gresik, Tuban, and Sunan. In 2022, 2021, and 2023, I get some evidence from the Kyai position in Indonesia local elections, especially in the 4 areas, Gresik, Tuban, Situbondo, and Sunan. Maybe some student from Situbondo, maybe from Gresik, maybe from Tuban, and from what I say, from Situbondo, maybe. Raise your hand, maybe from Situbondo, Gresik. Raise your hand. Okay, yeah, from Gresik. Okay. Ya, saya mau cerita sedikit ya tentang bagaimana pengalaman saya melakukan riset di 4 wilayah itu selama 3 years ago ya, selama 3 tahun terakhir, conducting research in 4 areas ya in East Java, especially about political contestation in Pilkada, indirect elections in Pilkada, So I find some Kyai's position is very, very strong in determining the candidate of local leaders in some areas in East Java, especially or in Java generally. Ladies and gentlemen, and we know that the political roles of Kyai post 1998 political reformation has always been an interesting theme to be debated. Kyai, who defined it as a male Islamic figure in Indonesia traditional Muslim community, often became important actors in Indonesian politics, especially during the crucial stage of the political world, both before and after independence. Similarly, in the post-reformation in 1998, they didn't only become the leaders of Pesantren Islamic Public School, but they achieved higher political positions, such as becoming region governors, minister, and even becoming the president. And you know, President Abdul Rahman Wahid, that is the Kyai, that is the Kyai. So you will find some governors and ministers and region might be from Kyai. So you know that for example like this, I take some I take some researchers opinion, especially from kids in 1960 researchers in Paris, Java, and published his most popular work, The Religion of Java. In this book, Gates divided into Javanese people into three variants based on their spiritual orientation: Santri, Abangan, and Priai, or Javanese aristocrat. In the Santri community, the Kyai figure has a central position. The Kyai not only teach Islamic knowledge, but must be mastered by devout Muslims, but they also have an important position in showing the root of secure life in the hereafter. Essentially, a Kyai is a teacher or a mentor who teach religious knowledge and give sermon in the Pesantren Islamic Boarding School. Maybe some of you graduated from Pesantren. Raise your hand. Okay, from Pesantren, graduated from Pesantren. Any others? Okay. Yeah, maybe you are familiar with the Kyai. Beside pesantren, madrasah, masjid, and musola, small quiz. But between their religious activities, they also have extensive social role as a part of those responsible for surrounding environment. An advantage of the Kyai is in their skill in developing communication with the society, with it glimpses, low profile, and using simple words and sentences. Moreover, their houses and their pesantren are usually located in the middle of the village or kampung. Thus, there is no gap between them and non-pesantren people. Because the pesantren usually in the middle of the kampung, in the middle of the village, so no gap between the Kyai's houses and the people houses. So similar between Kyai and the people. And Kyai role not only in the pesantren, not only in the all domestic affairs are consulted to the Kyai. For example, like asking for their prayers and consideration, including advice or in seeking a partner, mencari jodoh, mencari pasangan. Usually people come to the Kyai and asking how to make my son, my daughters get the partner as well as possible, like this. Jadi masyarakat datang ke Kyai itu bukan hanya sekedar mencari ilmu, tapi juga mencari jodoh. Giving birth, naming a child, healing sick child, and like doctor, I think, ya, like doctor healing sick child. Jadi Kyai itu bukan sekedar, tapi juga seringkali masyarakat datang itu untuk menyembuhkan putra putrinya yang sakit, ya, itu healing sick child. Ya, kalau Pak Lutfi dengan Pak Ajeng karena tinggal di kota mungkin tidak merasakan itu. Tapi yang seandainya anaknya Pak Ajeng itu tinggal di desa, mungkin kesulitan cari dokter datang ke Kyai. Ya, you will find it in some areas in East Java, in Madura, for example, or in the central Java, in the bank of Java. Maybe you will find it where people come to the Kyai to healing sick children. Although in that village, in that city, the doctor or nurse, yeah, remain in that village or in the city. Seeking job, easily business, and moving houses. Moving houses, pindah rumah itu kalau orang Jawa datang ke Kyai. Moving houses. Because of this strategic position, the Kyai is categorized the religion-based heritage society, or usually the local strongman, which influences social change, especially around the pesantren. The capital of these activities developed to become a power where the Kyai then intersect with the mass power and the politics. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, Kyai in local election. Generally, the Kyai are affiliated with the Nahdlatul Ulama, the largest traditional or Islamic organization in Indonesia and even in the world. According to Great Valley research, that no one in the world, the amount of the members like the Nahdlatul Ulama, more than 100 million members. Nahdlatul Ulama, this is the largest organization in the world, not only Indonesia but in the world. In the relation contact with the political parties, the Kyai are grouped into four. The first one, the Kyai who are both administrators of PKB, ya, Partai Kebangkitan Bangsa, ya, Nation Awakening Party. PKB is a political party established by Kyai Haji Abdurrahman Wahid Gusdur, ex-general manager of Nahdlatul Ulama, PBNU, for 3 periods, and the 4th president of the Republic of Indonesia in 1998. Mandated by the PBNU, NU prohibited NU administrator to concurrently become the head of the party, but in reality, some NU administrators concurrently become party administrators, especially as advisors. Majelis Suro. Jadi di PKB namanya adalah Majelis Suro, ya, advisors. The secondly, Kyai who are separately administrators of the KB or NU, but they have the intent relation, but separate between NU and administrators. The third one, Kyai who became administrators of parties others than PKB, who have good relation with the other Kyai outside of PKB due to alumni factors, or as both have been NU administrators before. And the fourth, Kyai who are neither administrators of NU nor of other parties, but they have emotional bond with the NU figure due to similarities in religious practices. For example, usually you practices the Ahl-Sunnah wal Jamaah doctrine, yeah, in prayer, usually including this group in this group form. The fourth group usually originated from alumni of non-pesantren education who are affiliated with the NU religious tradition. These four relations might mutually or separately involves the Kyai roles. Ladies and gentlemen, the next one, in many cases, of local election, the Kyai political power might be so dominant. It might control the strategic political node so that they suit their interests. Yeah, I repeat again. It might control the strategic political node, to control all the strategic issues in the local election. As the Kyai power is outside of the political party, they might act more freely. Maybe you follow my class, especially for the local election and the local government and the local election, and the local party. Ada yang mengikuti mata kuliah saya di politik lokal dan pemerintahan lokal. We usually speaking about the Kyai power in the local election, and here I can say that it may control all the strategic political nodes so that suit their interests. As the Kyai power, it is outside of the political parties, they might act more freely. The Kyai are free to determine the head of the religion candidates. I said before that I find it in Situbondo, Gresik, Tuban, and Sunan that the Kyai free to determine the head of the religion candidate. Even though they must still use the political party vehicle, they don't have to be bound to the various organizational procedure of political parties. You know that in the political parties, there are some procedure to determine the candidate of the political leader. So, Kyai outside our name free to determine and not bound to the organizational procedure. It is very, very determinant position in the local elections. At the end, the political parties will merely to be only just step of the Kyai decision, especially if the Kyai decision have become a network of power with the other influential element. Usually, political parties only step what became the Kyai decision, the final decision. The political party only stand and no brief to determine to get the Kyai decision. Although affiliation or coalition of the political parties. It is not only happen for the Islamic parties, it happened too for the secular parties. Ladies and gentlemen, concluding remarks. The Kyai position as the local elite has very, very strategic influences in determining who must become the head of the region. The strength of the Kyai influence might exceed the political power. I repeat here, the strength of the Kyai influence might exceed the political parties' powers. When facing highly influential the Kyai, political parties often face a problematic situation this year. Problematic situation, especially for Islamic-based parties. So far, the Islamic Party used the Kyai figure is an important part of their political marketing strategy, including in bringing victory to candidates proposed by the political parties. When the Kyai have their own candidate, it is not uncommon that the political parties are forced to bow the Kyai's desires. This one might be the main point here. When the Kyai have their own candidate, it is not uncommon that the political parties are forced to bow the Kyai desires. The next, even though there are Kyai who become political party administrators, the Kyai are not always bound by selection of candidate determined by political parties. The Kyai's authority is basically outside of political party network. Outside, not far different yeah, like local strongmen, yeah, beside Kyai, for example, like Fataya, for example, like Ansor, maybe like IPPNU, atau IRM, Ikatan Remaja Muhammadiyah, ya, Ikatan Muhammadiyah. So the Kyai authority is basically outside of the political party network. Because of that, it is not uncommon that the Kyai political decisions are based on the Kyai interests which are outside of the political party. Yeah. The Kyai have a network outside of the political party's formal structure. Yeah, the main point here, this is the network. Yeah, network. The Kyai network to mobilize the masses which may be used as a bargaining tool against the political parties. Yeah, the network outside of the political parties, yeah, to mobilize the masses we might use to gain the political parties, because the Kyai usually the owner of the head of the pesantren, so it is free from all the interests outside of the pesantren, so freely. On the other hand, in cases where the political behaviors of Kyai are FISIP with those of the political parties, it may be seen as a form of the Kyai resistance against the dominant and the hegemony of political parties. Yeah, I repeat again. In cases where the political behaviors of Kyai are FISIP with those of the political parties, it may be seen as the form of the Kyai's resistance against the domination of the hegemony of political parties. Like quote in the pesantren that no Kyai, no pesantren, and no pesantren, no pupil. So political parties, it is only one, a part of the pupil in the region, in the village. So here, if there is a political parties on the Kyai domain and making some decision contrary with the Kyai decision, maybe it is very, very difficult, yeah, for the parties to get the voice when the general elections of the Pilkada, yeah, being held in some areas, especially in the region where the Kyai and the Pasarten located. The political parties only make a Kyai name and figure into mere tool or to scope the vote Muslim without adequate reciprocity for the Kyai nor the Pesantren institution. This might be read, yeah, as the Kyai's way of stating their existence, that there cannot be any political decision which influence the pupil lives without considering their voice and their moral consideration. Ladies and gentlemen, finally, I want to say that the electoral democracy at the local level is not completely determined by political parties. Electoral democracy in the local level is not completely determined by political parties. The local strongmen like Kyai are actually more decisive in the democratic process. More decisive, yeah, in the democratic process. And the political parties don't have enough power to become a main force. They are waiting for blessing in decision of the Kyai. Intinya adalah bahwa demokrasi di tingkat lokal itu sering harus dihadapkan oleh tantangan-tantangan di mana peran partai politik itu hanya sekedar sebagai simbol yang sifatnya formal, tetapi yang sesungguhnya adalah kekuatan yang paling dominan, terutama di Jawa Timur, di Jawa Tengah, dan beberapa daerah-daerah di Indonesia di dalam menentukan pemimpin lokal, kandidat itu adalah tergantung kepada the local strongman, like Kyai sebagaimana Kyai, dan itu sangat menentukan terhadap apa yang saya sebutkan tadi itu tentang demokrasi di Indonesia. Tidak ada demokrasi Indonesia itu tanpa keterlibatan Kyai. Demikian, terima kasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Okay, thank you very much for Professor Dr. Haji Abdul Khalik, Master of Religious Studies, for the interesting presentation. And from Professor Dr. Haji Abdul Khalik presentation, we learned that Kyai's position as a local elite has a very big influence, huge influence. For example, for domestic affairs are usually consulted to Kyai for asking their prayers or consideration. For example, for seeking partner, for naming child, or healing sick children, etc. And also, Kyai's position as a local elite has a very strategic influence in determining who must become the head of the region, and it may exceed the political party's powers. And from the presentation, also we noted that the Kyai's authority is basically outside of the political party network. So the Kyai have a network to mobilize the masses, which may be used as a bargaining tool against the political parties. And when the Kyai have their own candidate, it is not uncommon that the political parties are forced to bow to the Kyai's desires. So that's all. Please applause again to all invited speakers for presenting their cool and interesting topics. And now we move to the question and answer session. And to all who is in the auditorium, please just raise your hand to ask a direct question. Or for the online participants, you can use the Zoom meetings raise hand feature to ask a direct question, and our host will turn on your microphone. Or you can also ask a question by typing your question on our chat box. Okay, don't forget, please state your name and institution of origin before asking your question. And please let us know to which speaker are you asking the question to. Either it's for Mr. Azmil or to Professor Abdul Khalik or to both of our speaker. Okay, let's proceed to the question and answer session. Okay, we have Zoom. Okay. In the Zoom meeting, we have Mr. Colbit, and in this auditorium we have 3 participants who want to ask. Maybe we can start from the online Zoom meeting first. Okay.
Can I proceed my questions?
Sure.
Hello? Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Abang Azmil, salam kenal. My name is Muhammad Qabil Ainul Arif. I am a lecturer at International Relations Department here in this faculty of Political and Social Sciences. My questions of ours, I will deliver my questions to Brother Azmil. It's very interesting to know that you have a special relationship with Indonesia, especially your wife. Congratulations. I mean, you must know well then Indonesian way of thinking also. Yeah, that's my point of questions. Since I've been learning about Malaysian politics up to now, I always wonder to know from the eyes of the Malaysians, the perspective of Malaysians about the decisions, your country decision to utilize constitutional democracy. So what is the real considerations that you feel, as well as maybe in the grassroots level that you feel that the constitutional democracy is good for Malaysia compared to Indonesia, which is in the politics we always we say no to divide society based on SARA. SARA issues is forbidden in Indonesian politics. Ethnic, religion, race, group sentiments, because we as Indonesians see that SARA will make trouble in the country. So our unitedness among Indonesian citizens. For Indonesians, we experience or we frightened with some ethnic-based riots. As you know, in the past we have some, but I know also that Malaysia actually also experienced more severe impact actually because of the ethnic-based riot, especially in 1964, that was leading to the formations of Singapore at that time. So we consider that polarizing society based on the identities, based on ethnic, religion, race, and any group sentiments is bad for the country's development and democracy. But I don't know, what about the Malaysian perspective? Is such polarization good for you? Yeah, thank you, brother.
Should I answer now, or do you want to collect all the questions first, and then I will answer them accordingly? Sorry, I cannot hear.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay. Mr. Azmil, maybe we can collect all the questions first from all the participants. Thank you. Okay, we move to the next question, maybe from Pak Lutfi. Time is yours.
Assalamualaikum. Mr. Azmil, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Thank you. My name is Lutfi. I'm a lecturer in International Relations Study Program in UINSA. My question is related to the previous question from Mr. Gobit. For example, if I imagine in, let's say, Singaporean politics, there's a difference between the role of the president and prime minister. And if I'm not mistaken, in Singapore, there is, the president takes turns, sometimes a Malay president, sometimes a Chinese background, and sometimes an Indian background. My question is, does this also apply in Malaysia? In election, is there like, do the political parties take turns? Sometimes the Chinese party or the Indian party or the Malay party have more seats maybe in the parliament, or is it purely based on the vote? If it's purely based on the vote, does that mean that the Malay background party always have a dominant number of seats? And how does this relate to the decision-making process in Malaysia, which represents most of the society? And I have another question to Pak Dekan. Is that okay, Ms. Moderator? Okay. My question to Professor Abd Chalik. The question is, it seems like we are seeing the trend that every time Indonesia has a presidential election, it's always, I would say, profitable or beneficial for the candidates to try to have a vice candidate maybe from a religious background party. For example, if I can mention names, like Mr. Jokowi, he actually took Kyai as his vice president. Okay, and now we are also seeing the trend in the next election in 2024. Everyone tries to get, for example, Anies Baswedan, who was the opposition of Jokowi. He actually takes PKB now as his vice. Now, is this merely a strategy of getting more support, or is there any role of the Kyai in choosing, okay, you are allowed to take this candidate as your partner, or maybe you cannot? Is there the role of Kyai in that, or is this trend merely political to get more support? Thank you.
Thank you to Mr. Lutfi for the question. Mr. Lutfi asks to Mr. Azmil and to Prof. Haji Abdul Khalik. And we proceed to the next question. Please raise your hand. Okay, Miss Adina. Yeah.
Thank you for this opportunity. I wanna ask to Mr. Abdul Khalik. Kyai is a political identity that impossible to remove, right, as we know. And Kyai I believe he have believed that might be possible to being polarized. As Islam figure, and Islam is bring peace. Is Kyai have a strategy to minimize this phenomenon, like polarized? Because through survey that I read in Compass, it's around 59% your generation afraid for this phenomenon. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Miss Adina, for the question to Prof. Haji Abdul Khalik. Now we have one question in the chat box from the Justin Wea to the both invited speakers. The question is to both speaker to my question. Okay. You spoke about how the opposition party has been more interested in recent years by grouping themselves to remove the ruling establishment. What do you think might be the cause? Secondly, I'm from Africa and we have experienced this political action over the years in some African countries by opposition fighting the ruling party with everything, most likely backing by the ordinary citizens. On the other hand, if the strategy didn't work, it has usually resulted in military coups across Africa. What can you have to say about such action? That's the question. To about Prof. Haji Abdul Khalik and to Mr. Azmil. Maybe we open one more questions from, okay, Miss, yeah.
Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Good morning, Mr. Azmil. So let me introduce myself first. My name is Kusmardani Zainuddin. I am a student of Department of International Relations. As you know, there are a lot of religions in this world, especially Islam. And of course, in Malaysia, Islam is around 65%. So I have several questions actually. My first question is, can the rise of Malay-Muslims, Majoritarianism in general elections be attributed to a sense of insecurity or perceived threats to the cultural identity of the Malay Muslim community? And the second one is about how do the values and principles of democracy intersect with Malay-Muslim majoritarianism in general elections, and are there any inherent tensions or contradictions? Thank you.
Thank you, Miss. So I will repeat again. The two question is for Mr. Azmil. Okay, thank you. Okay, maybe we can proceed to the answer session first. Maybe for Mr. Azmil, you can start to answer all of the questions. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I feel like I'm taking the exam right now. So thank you for all these great questions. So Pak Kobit, yes, I've spent almost 20 years trying to understand the Indonesian way of thinking. I mean, I've studied Indonesia long before I met my wife. So I wrote my master's thesis and PhD thesis on Indonesian culture and politics. So I've lived in Indonesia, even teach English at the Pondok Pesantren in Kalimantan Selatan. So I do understand a bit, and also as a Malaysian, to see the similarities and differences between the two countries. So your question is why Malaysia use the consociational political system, because it is divisive on the surface, right? Maybe it's something that I've mentioned in my presentation that is not, it's almost unimaginable for Indonesian to use similar type of political system like in Malaysia. I think there are several reasons. First, I don't think we can understand what's going on in our present time without understanding our history, right? So when you look at Malaysia in right after World War II, right? So the same like Indonesia. So I will go a bit into Indonesia after this, just to give a more comparative perspective, right? When you look at Malaysia post World War II, when the same like other former colonies, so there were a lot of movements, right? Trying to gain independence from the colonizers, from the former colonial masters, right? So in Malaysia, it was the British. In Indonesia, it was the Dutch, right? So in Malaysia, back then, right? So the same like Indonesia as well. So there was no one vision of what the country should be, right? Or what the nationhood should be. This new Malaysian nation should be, right? So there are competing views, competing visions, right? So one of the visions that were being propagated back then. So one major vision at the time, it was to see Malaysia as completely different than what Malaysia is now, right? So now when we see Malaysia, we see the Malays, we see the Chinese, we see the Indians, right? They're Malaysians, but they're very distinct ethnic background. But back then, this whole idea of Malaysia, Bangsa Malaysia, right? Or Melayu, the redefinition of the idea of Bangsa Melayu, right? So Bangsa Melayu is perhaps like Bangsa Indonesia, right? So when you see Bangsa Indonesia, you don't see like people from different regions or it's only for people for different ethnic groups, right? You see Bangsa Indonesia as something that's very, if Indonesian, you are also Bangsa Indonesia, right? So back then there was a similar idea too, Bangsa Melayu. So there was a constitution, a constitutional draft that was proposed that say that any Chinese or Indians who came from China, from India before World War II and have lived in Malaysia, they can choose to be Malay. Imagine that, if you're Malay, if you're Chinese or Indian, you can be Malay, right? As long as if you agree to speak Bahasa Melayu and you agree to renounce any allegiance to your old homeland, right? And you give your allegiance to your new homeland, which is Malaysia. So that was the idea. So there's no but this is the idea that was brought up by the people, by grassroots movement, mainly by leftist organizations. But then after, in 1948 in Malaysia, there was this emergency period. It's almost like what happened in Indonesia in 1965, 66. So the left in Malaysia were decimated. It was almost disappeared, right? And along with the leftist movement in Malaysia, this idea that Bangsa Melayu can be anyone, right? Regardless if you're Chinese, Indian, Malay. So what replaced it was now the kind of system that we see now, this consociational system, where the elites, the ethnic elites, so the Chinese elites, the Indian elites, the Malay elites, they went to London, they negotiate with the British to gain independence. And they agree to have this consociational system in place, right? So that as a minority, their rights are protected in Malaysia. So their rights are not being overwhelmed or taken over by the majority Malay. So this is what happened in Malaysia, right? So so we have this consociational political system that we practice until today, that actually becoming less and less irrelevant in Malaysia, as you can see from my presentation earlier. All right, so ethnic-based political parties are becoming less relevant in Malaysia. Right? So in Indonesia, if you remember, right? So even before Bung Karno, before demokrasi terpimpin, right? Guided democracy in Indonesia. Indonesia practiced a parliamentary type of democracy, right, from 1950 to maybe 1955, right? And then Sukarno consolidated, right? The whole idea is power, the whole idea of Nasakom, right? And then it turned Indonesia into a more unitary state. Right? I'm sure that you teach this in your class as well, right? So a unitary form of state, and then you have Orde Baru, which is also another unitary state, right? Only a single entity, right? And then only reformasi that you see a more decentralized, a bit more fragmentation. So I think this is what's happening, so we have to understand the historical trajectories in order to understand what is going on right now in modern times. And also for Pak Lutfi question, political parties in Malaysia, of course, as I've said, the dominant political party is always the Malay political party. And also the Malay political parties always gain the most seats simply because the Malays have the highest, the highest percentage, forms the highest percentage of the population, 65%. So that translates to a lot of seats in the parliament. So in Malaysia, it's always the biggest party in the parliament is always the Malay party. So from the biggest party, is where the prime minister comes from, right? So the prime minister always Malay and Muslim as well. So, and there's also this understanding that the prime minister, even the deputy prime minister in Malaysia, has to be at least a Muslim, right? Or Malay-Muslim, right? So it's almost unthinkable in Malaysia to have a non-Muslim prime minister, a non-Malay prime minister. The same like Indonesia as well. I'm sure I remember one survey done by Indikator Indonesia that shows that asking Indonesian Muslims if they prefer Muslims or non-Muslim as the president, I think like a huge number, I think like 80%, more than 80% say that they prefer Muslim to be the president of Indonesia. But then if you go further down, then it become more tolerant for, you go to governor or bupati, right? So, but for the president, the same like Malaysia as well, the expectation is that it has to be a Malay Muslim. And then for Justin's question, the role of the opposition is in a democracy, you need opposition, you need healthy opposition, you need competition, healthy, free and fair competition. I think the key here, or maybe should I say the key difference between what is happening in Malaysia or Indonesia and in your country or in many African countries is that opposition, when they lose election, they accept the defeat, right? So and then they go back and then they compete again in the next election to gain power, right? So you don't see opposition that resulted in the coup d'etat that you see in many African countries, or even in the region we see in Myanmar or in Thailand, right? So I think that's the difference, but it's healthy to have this change of government through democratic means. So peaceful transfer of power, I think, is the very essence of democracy. And then for Kusma, if I get your name right, I'm sorry if I don't get your name right. Yes. So it's the as I said in my presentation, the threat to the perceived threat, right? So I think you have to differentiate between actual threat and perceived threat, right, to Malay interests and Islamic interests in Malaysia, which is very very pervasive, right? So resonates in Malaysia. I mean, this is the roots of the major polarization that we see in Malaysia now, right? So your question about the principles of democracy and the Malay interests, right? So for the longest time, I don't know if you learn this in your class, right? So you know how in a part of democratic practice is to have redelineation, right? So when you redraw the parliamentary district, the political boundaries, right, to determine like which voters fall in under which district, right? Or daerah or dapil, right? In Indonesia, daerah pilihan, right? So in Malaysia, we have redistricting. So for the longest time, the UMNO Barisan Nasional Government has been redrawing the parliamentary district to favor certain ethnic groups. So most of the parliamentary districts in Malaysia either the Malay majority or Chinese majority, right? So when it's Malay majority, it obviously favors the ruling government, right? So for the longest time, the UMNO Barisan Nasional had benefited from this, right? So now we see that that this is actually it's actually the biting them back, so it actually, when you have this principle of democracy, when you draw a parliamentary district, it should be equal representation of ethnic groups or enough diversity in a district, right? So every party can compete equally in a particular district, but that is not the case that you see in Malaysia, where most of the seats are either have ethnic majority, right? So either Malays or non-Malays. So now there is a proposal in the parliament to debate redistricting, because it has been almost 20 years since Malaysia has redrawn its parliamentary districts, do this redelineation exercise. So, and it's very contentious because the Malays feel that if you do this, then it will dilute their power in Malaysian politics. So it becomes very contentious along racial and religious lines. So that is what's happening in Malaysia. So perhaps I will give back to moderator and also Pak Prof for the response. Thank you very much.
To Mr. Azmil from in the chat box. But before we proceed to the question, maybe we can hear the answer from Professor Haji Abdul Khalik for all the questions that have been asked by the participants.
Thank you, Pak Masa. I have 3 questions from Pak Lutfi, from Africa, and from student. Yeah, from student. 2 students asked me about how to minimalize the political identity. Yeah, I would like to answer for all. Yeah, because there are similarity between Pak Lutfi and the student Africa's question, especially about the Kyai position. Yeah, and speaking about the opposition in Indonesia, I think in Indonesia no opposition, no opposition, because you know that Indonesia use the presidentially model, not parliamentary model like Malaysia or the other countries, especially in the West Europe might be. So in Indonesia, when using the presidential model in the government process, maybe no opposition. When, for example, there is a party outside of the government, usually place them not as not opposition, only like what I say, competitor, maybe competitor. Yeah, I agree with Pak Azmil said that like Malaysia not only opposition but only a competitor. For example, like PKS, in 2019, for example, and Gerindra in 2000. 2000 berapa ya? Gerindra yang nggak berada di pemerintahan. Ya, 2015 ya. Oke, 2015 ya. 2015 maybe like Gerindra and PKS or something like that is only a competitor, not opposition. So you know that Indonesia, according to funding fathers, usually because Indonesia is the largest country in the world, so there are many ethnicity, races, and religions. So the laws or the constitution must be umbrella for all the races, for diversity in Indonesia, in religion, races, maybe, and ethnicity, maybe. Why we choose the presidential model? It is one of the relevant and suitable model for Indonesia country. And the next one about the position of Kyai, like Pak Lutfi, you know that when speaking about the Kyai in Indonesia, especially we must learn more about the foundation of Kyai, the basic the basic doctrine of Kyai, using in political practice as the views of Kyai using the fiqh or Islamic jurisprudence. In fiqh, there are two methods, especially the usul and the next one qawaid. Usul and qawaid, it is the method how to make the istinbat hukum, in Islamic jurisprudence, especially in fiqh. When the main principle of the Islamic jurisprudence, especially for the Kyai's perspective, usually using the tasamuh, tawatu, and tawazun, tolerant, moderate, and makes a balance between the left and the right power. For example, like that. The left and the right perspective. For example, communist and liberal. And to be the moderate. It is one of the fiqh or Islamic jurisprudence perspective in practicing in political practice. So that is to minimalize, like the Kusumas say, to minimalize, the conflict between one people to people, one group to the other group. So usually Kyai to be a mediator, facilitator at the middle of the some diverse group. For example, like in political practice in president election or in general election. Why, for example, Kyai remain in all the parties, for example, like this, or in group. Why? Because according to the Kyai perspective, especially for the Islamic jurisprudence, that moderate it's mean in practical practices, how to make all the Kyai position to be umbrella for all the group, all for the ethnic, for all the school in Indonesia, madhab itu. Jadi in praktis kira-kira begitu. Kenapa kemudian Kyai itu selalu berada di beberapa partai politik, ikut mendukung presiden A, B, C, D dan seterusnya itu karena memang latar belakang doktrin school dalam Kyai itu, dalam madhab Kyai yang bersifat tawazun, tawaddu dan tasamu, moderat, toleran dan tidak mengikuti arus kanan dan arus kiri. Baik itu adalah ke kanan liberal maupun yang ke kiri itu adalah komunis like that. Jadi itu harus menjadi umbrella. Maybe you can see in some qawaid fiqh, for example, like this, darul mafasid muqaddamun alal jalbil masalih, for example, like this. Jadi Kyai itu selalu mendahulukan kemaslahatan dibandingkan dengan kepentingan sesaat. Makanya mereka rela berkorban untuk kepentingan bangsa. There are maybe some cases, for example, in Southeast Asia, in South Asia maybe, yang membedakan kenapa kemudian negara kita yang sangat-sangat besar sekali, yang sangat multi etnis sekali, sampai sekarang itu kok masih bisa hidup dengan survive tanpa tengkar satu persatu, itu salah satunya karena ada Kyai, ada NU, ada Muhammadiyah yang menjadi umbrella, yang menjadi foundation di Indonesia. Kalau Kyainya itu sudah beda dengan negara itu akan kacau balau, akan hancur like the other countries, for example in South Asia, maybe in Afghanistan, in Afghanistan, for example, like this. Not only Afghanistan, in Middle East, for example, in Syria, in Lebanon, I think we can make a difference between Indonesia and the other country in the world, especially in its Islamic world, like in Syria, maybe in Iraq, in Iraq. Why? The Kyai's position is the most important in the political practices in Indonesia. Why choose not only for one group, but in all group there is a Kyai. Like Pak Fu, not only in one Islamic parties or in the secular or national party, all the national in secular party, you will find the Kyai to be administrator, to be an advisor. That is the Kyai position, and to be umbrella for all the party power in Indonesia. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Professor Dr. Haji Abdul Khalik, for the answer. And to Mr. Azmil, okay, actually, there's a question for Mr. Azmil in the chat box. There's a quite long question,
Yeah, I saw the question.
Okay, and also he added a question again for you, Mr. Azmil. Okay, and also we have a question again from Miss Rida to both our speakers, to Pak Azmil and also to Prof. Khalik. Okay, I would like to read the question for Prof. Khalik from Miss Rida. The question is, are there generational difference in attitudes toward the involvement of religious leaders or Kyai in politics? Okay, so are there generational differences in attitude toward the involvement of religious leaders or Kyai in politics? Okay. Okay, is there any question from this auditorium? Okay, one. Okay. You can proceed to the
Should I okay.
Okay. To Mr. Azmil, we have another question from the auditorium. Okay, maybe we can collect as the like the first session first. Okay. Okay, Miss. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you for speakers for the complex explanation. I want to ask, I'm Ph.D. from International Relations student UINSA. I want to ask to Mr. Azmil Tayeb. As Professor Abd Chalik said, the Kyai in Indonesia has its own role in political advice. As we know that Malaysia is made up of several ethnicities spread across the states, across each state. Do Kyais have the same crucial role as in Indonesia? Thank you. Okay, thank you, Ms. Happy, for the question to Mr. Azmil. She asked about does the Kyai have same strategic influence in each state in Malaysia, especially in local election in each state in Malaysia. And one more question, Mas Satria. Okay.
Okay, Assalamualaikum. My name is Satria Dava Syabana. I'm from International Relations student in UINSA, Surabaya. So I have several questions. The first one for Professor Abd Chalik. Okay. This is my question, Prof. In what ways do the role of Kyai connected with the culture of politics, and how can their participation be consistent with the idea of democracy? That's the first question. And the second one for Mr. Azmil. Here's my question. How has the evolution of Islamic politics in Malaysia shaped the concept of Islamic democracy in Malaysia? So that's all my question. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Okay, Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Okay, we have a lot of questions. Maybe to Mr. Azmil, are you ready to answer all the questions?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Maybe the time and screen is yours, Mr. Azmil, to answer all the questions.
Okay. All right. Thank you for all those questions. They're really good questions. So the first one from Morphe Solomon. So corruption used as campaign issue that determine the way that voters vote, right? So that determines the voting pattern among the voters versus ideology, right? So the chronological order of that, I think instead of seeing the two as mutually exclusive, I think we see, these two have always existed together, right? So corruption and ideology. So the Malay voters for the longest time, they were able to tolerate corruption to a certain degree of their leaders, as long as they know that the Malay leaders and the Malay political parties such as UMNO remains in power, remains at the head of the government to protect Malay rights and Malay interests, right? So there is this sort of like a implicit arrangement or understanding that it's okay, leaders are human, they're tempted by wealth, so it's okay for them to be corrupt, as long as they have the larger goal of protecting the Malay rights and Malay and Islamic rights in Malaysia, in their mind, right? So, but that changed in 2018. So in the 2018 election. So before that, if you remember, the former Prime Minister Najib Razak, he was involved in this huge financial scandal, the corruption scandal, the 1MDB scandal, that involved tens of billions of US dollars of corruption that spanned across the world. He was investigated by the FBI, and so I mean, that was the turning point, a critical juncture in Malaysian politics, because suddenly Malay voters, they cannot tolerate that kind of corruption anymore. They say that's too much, right? So you can see from then on, the Malay voters shifted their vote to other parties, right? So that's when you see corruption became a major campaign issue in Malaysia, right? So from then until now, right? So yes. So I would say both they coexisted, ideology and corruption coexisted for a long time, but at some point before the 2018 general election, because of the huge financial scandal, the 1MDB scandal, the former Prime Minister Najib Razak was involved in. So that pushed the Malay voters away from UMNO. And then election denialism. I think that the second prong of your question, right? So I think this is also a trend that we are seeing more and more around the world, right? So I mean, the infamous example is Donald Trump, right? So he refused to accept his defeat in the 2020 election, right? And then he mobilized his supporters to reject the election results, try to influence officials not to certify the election results. And now currently he's being investigated, right? And being charged in court. And his lawyers, all were charged in court, right, for denying the election results. So in Malaysia, we have almost similar dynamic as well, because in 2022 election last year, there was no party that commanded a majority after the election. So after the results were announced, there was no one coalition that gained majority or a simple majority, an outright majority. So there were three parties. So the seats in the parliament were split three ways, right? So there were hung parliament. So there was no government after the 2022 election. So finally, the two coalitions, PH and BN, managed to get together, form a coalition, and then it was blessed by the king. It was acknowledged by the king, and then it became the government that we have in Malaysia right now, headed by Anwar Ibrahim. But the opposition, PN, refused to accept the defeat. Right? They said that they were the one who they should be given the right to form a government. So they were challenging it. They were talking about ways that they can regain the government, not through elections, but through undemocratic means, undemocratic ways. So there is a form of election denialism there as well, refusing to accept the results of the election and refusing to accept defeat. And then one from Ridha about young Malays' political participation and are their voices being heard, right? So yes, I mean it is being heard. So there are so Malay. I'm not saying that the young Malays are monolithic, right? So I'm not saying that young Malays all speak of one mind or one voice, right? So there are diversity among young Malays as well. so one thing for sure is young Malays, they don't have political allegiance like their parents or grandparents before, right? So their parents and grandparents might be loyal to certain political parties, like UMNO, for example. They see UMNO as the party that brought independence to Malaysia. So there is this concept of terhutang budi, right? Which I know that you have the same concept in Indonesia as well. So for the longest time, the Malays, they have this thinking that terhutang budi to UMNO for bringing independence to Malaysia. But their children, the young Malays now, they don't have similar thinking. You know, why should we terhutang budi to be grateful to this political party? So they're not as connected or loyal. So they can shift their allegiance, their loyalty to other political parties, which they have done in the last election. And also the young Malays, they tend to be very cynical or distrustful of political parties. They don't see political parties as really representing their interests. They see all these political parties only care about power, about their own self-interest. So a lot of cynicism, but at the same time, they still participate in politics, but not as members of political parties. So you see a lot of Malays, young people especially, they participate in NGOs, in civil society. They do a lot of volunteerism, helping with homeless people, feeding the homeless or tutoring refugee kids and things like that. So they feel like this is a way for them to participate and to make their voices heard, to make an impact in the society. In addition to so not only you don't have to be a member of a political party to have an impact on society. So you can still have an impact on society by other ways, especially by volunteering. And with Miss Hafidi, I don't know, I didn't really get the name. So Kyai in Malaysia have similar roles. Yes and no, right? So obviously Kyai in Malaysia is not as powerful as Kyai in Indonesia. So I mean, for one, Kyai, we don't have similar tradition in Malaysia as in Indonesia. So we don't have the tens of thousands of pesantren network that can serve as a mobilization network, as vote harvesting network that you see in Indonesia, especially in Jawa Timur and Jawa Tengah, Jawa Timur especially, right? So like Indonesia, Capres, or they have to go to Jawa Timur and get the support from the Kyai for them to have any chance in Jawa Timur, which is has the largest number of voters in all of Indonesia, right? Which actually more than the population of Malaysia. So that goes to show like how, you know, I think like 30 juta kan Pak kalau pemilih di Jawa Timur kan. There's more than 40 million, right? If I'm not mistaken. And that's more than Malaysian population. So the whole of Malaysia. So, but in Malaysia, Kyai also for the longest time have been supporters of PAS, the Islamic party. Because mainly Kyai is based in rural areas, in the kampongs. So they have their pondok schools, they have their sekolah tahfiz, sekolah agama rakyat, which is all informal schools that is outside of the national education system, and it's based in rural areas usually. And then these tend to be the strongholds of PAS. So a lot of the Kyai, the Islamic party PAS. So a lot of Kyais, they support PAS. Even though other parties, especially the government, they do try to get the support from the Kyai. They provide funding, they provide money to the Kyais to maybe help to renovate their schools or to buy new equipment for the school and things like that. But it never works. So the Kyais then have always been loyal to PAS until today. And then finally, the question from Satria, from Mas Satria. So Islamic democracy in Malaysia, yes, I mean you can see that Islamic party and compete and they accept the rules of democracy. But then at the same time, there is also this understanding that Malay rights and Islamic rights in Malaysia have to be supreme. So that's the and other people, other ethnic groups, other religious groups, they should know their place in the society, right? So even though, yes, I mean, everyone has space to compete in a Malaysian democracy, but then it's never equal for everyone in Malaysia. Yeah. So yes, so that's my response to the questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Azmil Mohd Tayeb, for the answer. Actually, you have one more question in the chat box.
Oh, okay.
One last question in the chat box from the Winnie Salsabila. She asks about the influence of TikTok. Maybe you can answer.
Okay.
Maybe you can answer after Prof. Abdul Chalik.
Sure, yeah, sure, it's fine. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so we move to the question for Professor Abdul Chalik. Time is yours.
Yeah, the first question from Barida, yeah. Hello, Barida from Beijing. Yeah, you asked me about the general attitude, yeah, of a Kyai, yeah. Maybe Barida, yeah, the information about the attitude of Kyai is better than me, yeah, than I, yeah, when speaking about the Kyai attitude, maybe. You know that the attitude of Kyai usually from the substance of the Sharia or Islamic law, yeah, our maqasid Sharia, that is the values, yeah, that is the values where to be a foundation of the Kyai perspective, especially in the political practice, not only in political practice, but all in aspect, yeah, in all aspect. For example, like this, the values of the maqasid Sharia of substance of the Islamic law about the hifdul mal, hifdul nafs, yeah, hifdul din, hifdul siyasa, and the others, yeah. So you in traditional pesantren or in the Kyai perspective or for santri perspective, usually using the concept of the hifdul iman. Hifdul watan minal iman. Loving nation is a part of the belief, yeah, of the belief. I repeat, yeah. Hifdul watan minal iman. This is the jargon usually we can hear from the Kyai, from the santri, from the pesantren about the hifdul watan minal iman. Loving a nation is a part of the belief of the iman. So everyone, especially for the pesantren, Kyai, and santri, and the Muslim Indonesia have the same obligation to love Indonesia, yeah, to keep Indonesia, to be the God of Indonesia, how to make Indonesia better and better. That is the values, the main values of Kyai, of the pesantren of Kyai, especially in the in political practices. Yeah. And the next one about the involvement of democracy from Satria. Yeah. You know that in the end of my presentation, I say that the political practice don't have enough power, yeah, to become the main force. Yeah, they are writing the blazing and decision of the Kyai. Yeah, you know that political parties it can to decide itself in determine the candidate of the local leaders, yeah, and the local leader. So the Kyai as the local strongman, it is to become a partner for the political parties, and the involvement of the Kyai, it is most importantly, in the political party, especially in the local election. So it is impossible for the political party, especially in East Java, in Central Java, especially in the bank, in the bank of Central Java, to determine the candidate of local election without the involvement of the Kyai. I think so. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. To Prof. Dr. Haji Abdul Khalik. Actually, we have one more question for you from Winnie. She asks, what is your opinion regarding the Kyai's political decision to choose the political candidates? Are you sure that the Kyai really concerned of that ummah needs, or it is also the interest of the Kyai itself? Okay, thank you so much. Okay, we back to Mr. Azmil. Mr. Azmil, do you hear my voice?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, are you ready to answer the Winnie's question regarding to the TikTok's influence?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure the Indonesia, also TikTok plays a huge role in the political discourse, and also as a source of political information for people, especially young people. The same like Malaysia. I think the reason that PN and PAS in Malaysia had been very effective on TikTok because they're the first one to recognize the importance of TikTok amongst young Malays in Malaysia. So I think the same like Indonesia, Malaysia also, young people, especially they see Facebook is no longer cool, right? So no longer, it's not the place to be. It's full of their parents are on Facebook, their grandparents on Facebook, so it's no longer cool. So young people they move to other platforms, other apps. So in this case, TikTok, and I think TikTok is a very effective form of political communication as well. Because we've all been on TikTok, right? So it's like a whole different world. I've resisted TikTok for a long time, and then I finally gave in. I surrendered, and then I created an account because I was curious to see what's going on TikTok. And you have all these short videos, right? 2 minutes, 3 minutes. That's very, very quick. If you don't like it, you can just swipe up, right? And then this algorithm will give you more videos that you like, that you watch, right? So it amplifies whatever message that political party wants to get across, right? So I think in this case, it's very effective because in Malaysia, right? I'm sure in Indonesia as well. TikTok is, you don't need to have fancy video or camera equipment to create a TikTok video, right? In Malaysia, you see in the last election, the TikTok videos that are actually hugely popular, that have millions of views, these are videos of like regular people, regular people who are might not be directly related to political parties, regular people, young people talking to their phone, so they put their phone on a tripod, and they speak directly to the phone. They say like, oh, this is my worry. I worry that if we don't do anything, Malay and Islam will be gone from Malaysia, terhapus, and I worry about my future as a young Malay in Malaysia. Will I have a future here in this the so-called Malay homeland and Tanah Melayu and all these things. So this fear and insecurity that we talk about is being expressed, in these short videos of honest to God kind of, confession type of video that people make just using their own phone, right? And this resonates very deeply, very strongly with other TikTok users. So I think this is what effective, And then, of course, PAS, capitalizing on this, and then using trends as well. There are this trend, some trends, that the past politicians use, and that got millions of viewers, views. So I think it's hugely influential. I think after the election, suddenly the whole country woke up and realized that, wow, this is the TikTok election. People call Malaysian election last year TikTok election. Suddenly, especially old people, it's like, wow, they realize that TikTok is so influential in the last election, right? Including me. So I think it's the same in Indonesia as well, but I think Indonesia is much more open. I think Indonesia also has the problem with buzzers, right? So you have that always been for some years now, buzzers have for hire, right, by political parties, by politicians who hire buzzers to hype up their message, to spread hoaxes and disinformation. So I think the problem is more serious in Indonesia, but we also have that problem, but we don't have similar type of buzzers that you find. I mean, we have buzzers also in Malaysia, but maybe they're not a huge industry like you find in Indonesia. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Azmil, for the answer. Okay, we move to the question for Professor Dr. Haji Abdul Khalik about the Kyai's decision. Okay.
Yeah, from Mika. Oh, Winnie, yeah, you make the serious question. So serious question. Very challenging, yeah, for me to answer it. So yeah, I conducted a research in 2005, yeah, in 2005, especially about the political participation of Kyais NU in East Java. I take the data from some areas, yeah, in East Java, Madura, Pendalungan, yeah, Pesisir, and Arek. That is the five subcultures, the biggest subcultures in East Java, yeah, in East Java. There are two big cultures in East Java and Java and Madura, and I take the data from the five subcultures: Madura, Pandalungan, Pesisir, Mataraman, and Arek, yeah, and Arek. And I found three categories of Kyai. Yeah, I found three categories of Kyai. The first one, the Kyai Kampung, yeah, and the second one, Kyai Pesantren, and the last, the Kyai Pengulon. The Kyai Pengulon usually penghulu, yeah, who to be administrator when someone in KUA, for example, like this, yeah, for marriage, yeah, for marriage, yeah. There, I found three categories of Kyai: Kyai Kampung, Kyai Pesantren, and Kyai Pengulon, penghulu. Usually in Mataraman or in Arek, usually called Pengulon, penghulu. And my final description and final conclusion, I found three model of Kyai in political practice. Yeah, the first one, the category of the pragmatic, yeah, pragmatic Kyai, yeah, pragmatic Kyai. And the second one, the less pragmatic, and finally, in the non-pragmatic Kyai. Maybe for the more description about the pragmatic, less pragmatic, and non-pragmatic Kyai, maybe especially for Winnie, maybe you can find it in my Google Scholar, yeah. and my article published in Q1, yeah, Scopus Q1 Journal of Indonesian Islam, and it's titled Religion and Local Politics. Maybe you can upload, and maybe you can read more the final conclusion about the typology of the Kyai, especially in East Java, the pragmatic, less pragmatic, and non-pragmatic Kyai. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Okay.
Mbak Vila. Assalamualaikum. Yeah, Mbak Vila, can I respond to Prof. Chalik my questions?
Oh, okay.
Just
you can.
Yeah, 1 minute.
Okay.
Selamat pagi, Prof. Chalik. Ya, tadi yang saya tanyakan sebetulnya lebih kepada, are there any generational differences in attitudes towards the involvement of religious leaders? Adakah perbedaan like young voters and old voters toward the involvement of Kyai? Apakah ada perbedaan influence antara mereka yang young voters dengan yang old voters, yang generasi lama dengan generasi yang muda terhadap keterlibatan Kyai dalam politics? Are there, because I myself put my political preferences on vision and mission of the candidates. So should I feel less religious or less Muslims for not considering Kyai's guidance in politics? Apakah saya kemudian lebih less Muslim or less alim gitu, jadinya nggak alim kalau misalnya nggak mengikuti guidance-nya Kyai di dalam misalnya election tahun depan misalnya. Seperti itu Pak Kolik, terima kasih.
Ya, tadi tanyanya lewat tadi ya?
Iya, lewat chat.
Ya, lewat chat ya. Ya, the differ between the young and old voters ya. Perspective on Kyai might be like that ya, on Kyai. Perbedaan antara pemilih muda dengan pemilih tua ya, tentang Kyai, apakah kita ikut Kyai atau tidak gitu ya. 1 bulan kemarin, the last month ago ya, Mbak Rida, FISIP conducting research survey for the young voters in East Java ya. Interval age 17 to 42 age ya, itu yang dijadikan dasar, yang dijadikan sasaran itu umur 17 sampai 40 tahun. Nah itu, nah kecenderungannya anak muda itu tidak ke Kyai gitu kan. Kalau tidak salah hanya 2,5% yang how to be references ya to elect in 2024, only 3 maximally ya 3% ya yang dijadikan referensi Kyai atau ustaz. Sementara family up to 23 ya 43% itu yang voters itu akan menjadikan referensi keluarga sebagai dasar ya, referensi di dalam menentukan pilihan mereka, bukan Kyai. Tetapi pertanyaan, the next question must be follow it ya, yang harus diikuti adalah apakah anak muda itu juga, kenapa kok cuma 3% ya, sementara yang referensi orang tua itu sampai 43%, kata teman-teman, ya karena anak muda itu masih belum paham, karena anak muda itu yang akan diikuti oleh bapak dan ibunya, family-nya. Intinya adalah anak muda ikut orang tua ikut Kyai, dia ikut Kyai juga. Begitu kira-kira Mbak Rida ya. Terima kasih Mbak Rida. Ya.
Siap, terima kasih Prof.
Okay. Thank you to Professor Dr. Haji Abdul Khalik for the answer. I hope it answer Ms. Rida's question. Yeah. Okay. Thank you to all the outstanding speakers, to Mr. Azmil Mohd Tayeb, Ph.D, and also to Professor Dr. Haji Abdul Khalik, Master of Religious Studies. And due to the limited time, we have to end this plenary session. Once again, thank you very much to the outstanding speakers. And for the all participants for the questions. And now I would like to proceed to give certificates to our speakers and take pictures with the speakers also. And lastly, I would like also to ask to the online participants to turn on your video because the host will record screen capture. Okay. Okay, maybe that's all. Thank you very much to all the speakers and participants. Hereby, I will end this plenary session. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Oh ya, Mas Moderator dapat sertifikat juga. Thank you, Bu Ani. And for Pak Azmil,
Okay, here's the online certificate for Mr. Azmil Mohd Tayeb, Ph.D. Thank you, Mr. Azmil, for attending and for the interesting presentation in the SAICOPSS 2023.
Thank you.
Okay, now we are back to the master of the ceremony. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a lively applause for our speaker, moderator, and all of us. Dear all participants, we would like to remind you to fill out the attendance form for 2 days of attendance so you can receive the certificate. Thank you.
Dear Excellencies, distinguished guests, and all participants, for a while, let us see the short clips from the previous SAICOPSS.
SAICOPSS 2021 held by the Faculty of Social and Political Sciences.
For me,
Welcome to the second Sunan Ampel International Conference on Topic of Social Science 2000.
kind of the conference is kind of
Distinguished guests, and all participants, to close this event, let us sing the song Bagimu Negeri together. The audience is requested to stand up and put the right hand on the left shoulder.
Ladies and gentlemen, before we have our break time after we end this event, we would like to inform you that there will be 2 upcoming parallel sessions. In the first parallel session, after break, we will have 2 rooms, 3A and 3B, in which 3A with the theme Religion in the Digital Era,
and 3B with the theme Rethinking Local Governance and Local Democracy.
And after that, continue the last parallel session with the theme Human Security and Transnational Organized Crime in the Digital Era will complete the series of SAICOPSS 2023.
The organizing committee would like to thank you for your presence and apologize if there are any shortcomings in the implementations of this event.
Ladies and gentlemen, it has been a pleasure for me, Nadia Devina,
and for me, Muhammad Raditya,
to be your master of ceremony for these past 2 days.
See you at the next year of SAICOPSS 2024. Akhirul kalam. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Our FISIP
Terima kasih, Prof.
Ladies and gentlemen, we look forward to your attendance on time.
Thank you, Pak Azmil. See you.
Terima kasih, Pak Azmil.
Pak Azmil, thank you.
Ya, terima kasih semuanya ya. Nanti sampai ketemu lagi.
Ya.
Surabaya.
Ditunggu di Surabaya.
Merawan juga. Oke, terima kasih.
Ya, terima kasih Pak Azmil. Ya, lagi luring di Surabaya ya, offline ya.
Ya, insya-Allah nanti ketemu di bawah jalan sama Bu Nani.
Jangan lupa bawa nasi lemak, Prof.
Boleh. Ya, bye-bye.
Terima kasih.
Terima kasih.
SAICOPSS 2021 held by the Faculty of Social and Political Sciences.
Welcome to the second Sunan Ampel International Conference of Topical Social Science 2000.
Kind of the conference is kind of